We reconvene for Liberty Conspiracy live here on Rokfin, on Rumble, on Twitter/X, and on YouTube. Welcome, fellow conspirators, because freedom is out of fashion nowadays. Monday through Friday, we gather at 6 o'clock Eastern U.S. time, or whatever time zone you want to call home. Because freedom is out of fashion, we hop aboard the good ship Liberty, and we break apart the news stories to check and see if we can derive some of that liberty-sustaining information. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. I'm LG Grande, Buenos whatever, Gardner Goldsmith, the Big G, here with you, hanging out on the 6th day of May, 2024. Thanks for being here. I hope you had a beautiful, beautiful weekend. Boy, what a great one here in southern New Hampshire, or I mean in southern Russia, where, of course, we are financed by the Russian propagandists. And I hope you had a really good one as well. I hope your Monday was great. We're going to have a great night tonight. We're going to check in on the chat. We're going to find out what's going on, share information as well. I hope that you can get all the information that you want here. And if you want to, you can find the links over at my Twitter/X to all the stories that are out there. And of course, on Sundays, it's the Sunday News Assembly. Check out the Sunday News Assembly at my Substack, and you'll see at least 20 news stories, plus now at least 2 video links to stories that might pertain to freedom. And of course, we try to add contextual information to carry away that intellectual ammunition for greater understanding of liberty, philosophically, economically, morally, ethically, and religiously. Let's find out what's on tap tonight on the program. Everybody 5624. Is everybody happy? We're going to turn those political frowns upside down here near the electric fire. Let's find out what we're discussing tonight, and then we'll check in on the chat and say hello. I already saw a couple of the good folks over at Rumble. Lieutenant, I salute you. Tonight on the program, we're looking at the News Flash. Of course, it's the Immigrant Grand Hotel edition of the News Flash. What's that all about? Well, I'll give you the information on that one, and hopefully we'll bring a few smiles along with some maybe some frustrations. But it is interesting to see the way that the collectivist systems can never be worked out properly. We're also going to be talking about one other big item in the News Flash, and that has to do with free speech within one particular context. That is about abortion and protests over that. So we'll talk about that as well. We'll break open a larger chunk, I guess, a larger treasure trove of free speech pieces later in the program, and of course, get your opinions on all of them because I want to rely on you in the conspiracy. Also, we're going to be talking about NATO and what are NATO and U.S. weapons and money doing to Ukrainians and Russian civilians. We'll look at Al Jazeera being banned in Israel. It's a TikTok-esque attack, you might say. I know, it's amazing. Perhaps the Washington, D.C. elite are happy to see that. Then we'll talk about, of course, the U.S. version of that times 10, the TikTok ban, and anti-Semitism, the anti-Semitism bill heading to the Senate. Then we'll take a look at, yes, how much the executive branch seems to like a free press, or at least that's what they tell us. They seem to like a free press. We'll talk about that if you get to see my new piece for MRC TV. That was one of my 2 new pieces that came out today. And yes, I took off the gloves and slammed them around a little bit. And we'll, of course, talk about economic woes in commercial spaces. Again, if you're already looking at the billboard for the show, you already saw number 4 down there. Economic woes in commercial spaces are on the increase. Just as Gerald Celente predicted 2 years ago, it is happening. I know, it's incredible. It's almost as if people who understand free market economics actually can show people that, yeah, expansion of the money supply and then massive shutdown of any sort of trade systems can lead to this sort of problem. It's crazy. Then we're actually going to be looking at Joe Biden's chief economist, who also is embarrassing himself again. I don't think Joe Biden is listening to Gerald Celente. He's listening to this clownish type of language coming from this man who is, I guess you'd call him affably foolish. And hopefully that is not what you think of this show or any of the fellow people who come on the show. Hopefully it's all a good family atmosphere here for everybody. I hope you're having a great, great night, everybody. Gardner Goldsmith here with you. And by the way, if you are finding the show because of the MRC TV work that I do. Thank you very much. Again, I'll mention that I don't promote my Liberty Conspiracy program Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on the Eastern Seaboard of the United States. But if you find me because you're interested in following me on X, I do get to mention my X handle at MRC TV. And yeah, so thank you for being inquisitive and looking into the larger panoply, the larger landscape of liberty. It's the liberty landscape. I'm going to head to Rumble first because I saw Lieutenant Oracle of Truth was there. And Lieutenant Oracle of Truth is in the hot seat. He says, my air conditioner went. Oh, good. The climate is saved. Oh, I'm sorry. You're uncomfortable. You're going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be 95. Don't worry about it. Just keep thinking about Joe Biden. That'll keep you really cool, right? Absolutely. Put on some of those like aviator shades. I hear they're almost like air conditioning. It's just fantastic. I don't know if they can make those now with, the evil carbon emissions, otherwise known as carbon dioxide. Doesn't hurt anybody. Then Birdhouse Blues. Thank you. Rocket Ship of Liberty. Oh, I like that. I'm thinking the Federation without the Federation bureaucracy, without that one giant state thing, the Federation. This is the good Starship Liberty. I'd like that. Thank you. Very cool. And then with that, Freegan, hey, thanks for being there. Office space surplus was a pretty easy prediction to make. That's for darn sure. Absolutely right. In Rokfin, we've got Anarchy Andrew there. Hey, Andrew is working and listening, working for a living. You're taking what you're giving because you're working for a living. I'll get my harmonica out. Man, I like Huey Lewis in the news. Those guys are great. I don't know anybody who doesn't like Huey Lewis in the news. And it's good to see Free Thinker 59 is in the house. I dig that very much. It's sort of like Agent 99, Karen Carpenter is there. Oh, Karen, good to see you. And also, I know that Jason Barker is likely to be stopping by. I got at the end of the show, if I've got time, I'm got to do a few things. But if I've got time, I want to add a great announcement from Jason about the Knights of the Storm website. All right, everybody. So that's what we're looking at on the program tonight. And of course, if you want to throw in links, please do so. I'll check out the YouTube chat in just a minute. Let that sort of populate. And please spread the word about the conspiracy because, of course, freedom is definitely out of fashion nowadays. And one final mention. I want to mention to the folks at MRC TV how appreciative I am of how nice they are. You're looking at the Liberty Conspiracy billboard there. And I do want to get Eric Shiner back on as soon as possible. He is, of course, the director of MRC TV. And, we have some differences of opinion about things like United States support of Israel and stuff like that. And yet they consistently allow me to write on the things I want to write. And very rarely, last week, there were a couple little edits that were taken out of a fairly long video that, maybe I wouldn't have done myself. But hats off to the MRC TV people for being open to having a libertarian anarchist on the show. And if you're joining me because of what you saw over at MRC TV, thank you for being curious as well. All right, everybody, let's get right to it. It's time. You know what it's time for? It's time for us to check out a number of the breaking stories in a very compact, concise way. And the only way we can do that is if we do it via, you got it, the mothership, bringing us the Flashlight News Flash.
Misses and the grenade falls back into them. It rolls back towards him. Jesus, he must be a Russian spy. Of course, you got to ask yourself why the Western media and the politicians who are stirring up the barrel in Ukraine don't have more to say about this indoctrination of young kids. Well, people like our old friend Count Dooku, Nosferatu, what's his name again? Lindsey Graham, who isn't gay. Absolutely not gay. Not gay Lindsey Graham. Has a real hard-on for killing young people, it seems. And that goes all the way to being so dismayed, as you can see, with the fact that the conscription age in Ukraine isn't lower. He wants them in at, 15, 11, 12? Lindsay likes them young.
Yes? Oh, hello. Hello. We're Mary's parents. Oh, well, come on in, fellas. Hold it a second. Mary's parents burned to death last year. I know you guys. You're from the news flash.
Check this. It's literally decaying. It's like it's made of pasta. Look at it. That's just crazy. But what do you do if you look out the window of your plane and you see that you can't get into the pilots anymore? So what do you do? Fully enough, as Boeing hits the headlines for all the wrong reasons, another one of their whistleblowers has strangely a very healthy guy, a big athletic dude. He's into his health and well-being and fitness. He just happened to expire as well quite recently, didn't he, Augie?
Very suddenly, in a matter of days, he got infected.
Or conveniently? Did you say conveniently? Or?
And died from organ failure after all these years of healthy lifestyle.
Yeah.
Just coincidence.
Yeah, as plain as the nose on your face. And as Boeing are looking to avoid some tricky questions, particularly from its deceased, most of its whistleblowers are now dead, from its whistleblowers and the public, somebody else that we know, Sideshow Bob's niece, Jean-Pierre, the exceptionally intelligent and very, very diligently appointed lady who's in charge of Joe Biden's messaging. You think Joe can't get any worse? Check her out now in this cringe fest. Last week it was dancing in the mental home. Now today it's some sort of cringy deflection on why they never actually answer any questions. Run it, Augie.
I'm the White House press secretary. Of course, I sidestep a few polling questions here and there with, I don't want to get ahead of the president. Tonight, I want to get ahead of the president, and I have his speech right here. And there are some great punchlines. Here's my favorite. No.
I mean, do these people have nothing better to do? Does the U.S. have no problems, Augie? Collapsing infrastructure, increasing rents. Everything's going down the pipe, and this dude is acting literally like a clown in the White House.
You're from the news flash.
We're going to begin with breaking news from Israel, where the cabinet has voted to unanimously shut down Al Jazeera's operations in the country.
From the news flash.
I must oppose this misguided bill. While there is much in the bill I agree with, its core provision would put a thumb on the scale in favor of one particular definition of anti-Semitism to the exclusion of all others, to be used when the Department of Education assesses claims of anti-Semitism on campus.
All right, one and all, and we begin with our first immigration story. And for that, we need a little music, I think. Yeah, all right. No, we're not going to Iceland. We're not talking about Valhalla or Vikings. But we are talking about a story out of the Big Apple and a couple other stories, actually. So let's first go to NYC and talk a little bit about the very frustrating story for a number of folks who are from New York City. Evidently, a fancy New York City Broadway hotel is, according to news reports, being converted, yeah, you got it, Repo Man, to an illegal immigrant shelter paid for by the taxpayers. Now, as you know, I'm an anarchist, so I don't believe that there is anything valid about political borders. I also don't believe it's moral to force my neighbor to pay for the policing of said borders. I also know that the Constitution actually doesn't contain the word immigrant in it. It's a state issue. I also don't like the idea of forcing my neighbor to pay for somebody else's move. Somebody else's move that evidently is being brought about as part of what I get the impression is a major attempt to try to change the voting blocks in favor of the people who are moving the people here. So, being an anarchist, it sort of adds up that maybe, just maybe, the whole statist paradigm, the central command and control idea of controlling immigration, is showing its evil stripes right now. So let's head over to New York. Don't mind the maggots. Yeah. And let's check out the story from the New York Post as long as my CPU can handle it. Chic hotel in heart of Broadway converted to migrant shelter in latest sign of growing New York City migrant crisis. And this is just a quick thumbnail. A chic hotel. We're not talking the disco band, Le Freak Say Chic. No, that's not. I feel like George H.W. Bush. No, not gonna do it. Not gonna do Le Freak Say Chic. So, according to this, a chic hotel in the heart of Broadway has been quietly operating as a migrant shelter for over a year. The Post has learned as the Big Apple continues to grapple with the ongoing you-know-what crisis. All right, central planners. The 141 room. Okay, so there you go. That's that additional room. I mean, who wouldn't want to stay there? It must be awesome. The 141 room square hotel, and I hear it's hip to be square. And I'm through being cool, as Diva would say, at 226 West 50th Street between 8th Avenue and Broadway is just across from Gershwin Theater, George Gershwin, where the musical Wicked, that's the Massachusetts version of The Wizard of Oz. It's wicked pissa, dude. I'm going to go see Wicked. How was Wicked? Dude, it was wicked. Wicked? Yeah. You have any hockey in it? Nah, dude, no. But the Wicked Witch was wicked too. Guy. To our valued guests, they write, it is with great sadness that we announce the Square Hotel will be closed for the foreseeable future. And remember when everybody was complaining about this in Ireland? Like, we're pulling a Kolchak. Try to tell yourself it couldn't happen here. Well, it's just nice to know how much you care without your choice to be able to help people move. Figured I'd just give you that info, and I know that the people in Texas are really happy. Why? Well, because, of course, as we mentioned on Friday, it has been revealed, to use the passive voice, which states are the top states receiving the migrants as part of the Central Command and Control Biden administration migrant parole situation. That parole system allows the migrants to ask for 8 months not to be charged or deported, and then it just continues to recycle thanks to the beneficence of DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. Yes, the homeland. It's not Teutonic at all. Let's check this out via Fox News. Impact is severe. That sounds like an album from like AC/DC from like 1983. AC/DC's new album, Impact is Severe. Yeah! Texas Republicans erupt over DHS migrant flight program as state becomes top destination. Well, they should just be happy. It's like, it's a popular place. What's wrong with that? I don't see the problem. I don't know what that. Geez, aren't they proud? Don't forget, everybody. I mention it often when I talk about the immigration issue. The state of Texas, when it became a state, in its state constitution, when it was adopted in 1869, has a Bureau of Immigration in it. And of course, it wasn't until the Cheelong v. Freeman decision in 1875 in the Supreme Court that the Supreme Court just invented a federal control over immigration. It's supposed to be a state issue. And if states are having problems with their constitutionally Republican form of government, representative Republican form of government, so-called representation is not possible in any form of political system. However, because if it were a real representation, it wouldn't be a polis, it would be a business contract. But nonetheless, the state of Texas joined in years before the 1875 Cheelong decision, and the word immigration isn't in there. But if states are having problems and they say it's because of migrants crossing the border or something like that, they can appeal to the federal government according to the United States Constitution and ask the feds to help them restore some sort of civility or safety to their state. It's up to the legislature, or if the legislature of the state is out of session, then the governor can ask for that. The governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, has asked for that, and he has not been satisfied with the response of smoking Joe Biden. Texas Republicans overall, it seems, many of them, I think maybe but one that I've seen of the major national Texas Republicans, and many of the state Republicans are criticizing a Biden administration parole program for 4 nationalities after it was revealed this week that 3 of the top destinations for migrants under the program are in Texas, on top of the numbers that Texas is already seeing coming across the border that it already has in its southern portion. It's just another layer of the entirety of what we're dealing with. Representative Chip Roy, Republican of Texas, told Fox News Digital in an interview, but that's what people need to understand. It's a very specific program designed to flood the system, misusing parole to do it. Yeah. Fox News reported this week on how official stats show that during an 8-month period from January through August last year, roughly 200,000 migrants flew into the U.S. via a parole program for 4 nationalities. Of those, the vast majority landed in Florida, but 3 of the top 15 destinations were in Texas: Austin, Dallas, and Houston. Over 10,000 migrants traveled to those airports in that period. Yeah. So there you go. And again, if anybody wants the feds to get involved and they call themselves constitutionalists, then they can read the text of the Constitution and see it's a state purview until that document is amended the way that the founders wrote it could be amended. Now, one final piece in our news flash tonight, everybody. It has to do with free speech. And I'm going to play a free speech theme that actually will be usable throughout the night tonight. You can hear it echoing. In fact, you can hear the strains of those guitar strings being pulled right now, my friends. Yeah. The Psychedelic Furs, Entertain Me, Speak.
Talk to me, show.
So what happens if you say, oh, I don't know, or on a public sidewalk and you'd like to speak?
Why the want for all that I can't touch?
I don't know how exactly these public places work, because when one person wants to speak somewhere and another person wants to speak, sometimes they run into conflicts with each other. I don't get it.
Speak to me, and what is yours? Entertain me.
All right, so let's get to this one. If you were listening to David Knight or watching David Knight today, you heard him talk about this. LifeSite News did a very good job covering this. And in fact, I would like to play for you the little video, the compact video that LifeSite News put together. They've got an exclusive interview. Exclusive. Jailed pro-lifer says she was kept in solitary confinement for 22 days with lights on 24/7. They have the link. I've retweeted this. Please check this one out. This is about free
prolonged
speech
solitary confinement. Exclusive.
in public places. Let's find out. Here we go.
Exclusive. Jailed pro-lifer says she was kept in solitary confinement for 22 days with lights on 24/7. A jailed pro-life prisoner has been paraded in court in full shackles and says she has been punished with prolonged solitary confinement. Heather Idoni, a defendant in the Washington, D.C. FACE Act trials, told LifeSite News that she has been subjected to 22 days of solitary confinement. In an exclusive interview, she said that she received this punishment for sharing food with fellow prisoners. Idoni alleged that she was allowed to walk outside her cell only for 2 hours in the middle of the night each day, and that the lights of her cell were continually kept on. Idoni has been in prison since she was convicted last autumn. Fellow pro-life advocate Cal Zastro, who joined Idoni in another traditional pro-life rescue in Tennessee and has also been convicted in Nashville of violating the FACE Act, told LifeSite News that when Idoni was brought into the courtroom for a pretrial hearing in Detroit for yet another FACE Act trial, the U.S. Marshal had the middle-aged woman shackled at the wrists, waist, and feet as if she were a dangerous criminal. Read more at lifesitenews.com.
All right.
Exclusive. Jailed pro-lifer says she was...
Thank you very much, LifeSite. I appreciate what they do. And, of course, They've been heavily, heavily censored. Now, let's talk about the FACE Act, the Freedom to Access Clinic Entrances. That is a federal statute, and it completely contradicts the First Amendment because, of course, the First Amendment prohibits Congress from establishing any law that prohibits the right of free speech or freedom of association. So, what you have to look at when you look at these sorts of things is say, is it a federal statute? Yes. Does it infringe on the right to free speech? Yes. Is it unconstitutional? Yes. And you're done if you're a constitutionalist. If you look at state statutes, then the key there is to look at whether or not the state constitution has any promise of the right to free speech in it. And it just, I know, as shocking as it sounds, it just so happens that every state constitution does have a free speech clause in it. And basically meaning that the Constitution of the United States applies to the federal government. The FACE Act is patently, clearly unconstitutional. This woman has been subjected to 22 days of solitary confinement, and she is still a defendant. Okay? She's still a defendant. She stands for conviction now. She hasn't even gone through the process yet, and she has been subjected to 22 days of solitary confinement, okay, for protesting and speaking up in favor of life. But regardless of what the issue is, as far as their promises to their system, the system they tell us they will adhere, by which they will adhere, or to which they will adhere. I don't take that oath. Most of you haven't taken that oath unless you went into the military. They're the ones who do it. And they tell us they will swear an oath to the Constitution. Anybody who votes for that, or any judge who supports the continuation of the FACE Act to apply to this woman or anybody else, should be ashamed of himself or herself and leave immediately. And I don't just mean leave office. I mean leave the continental United States. Go someplace else, like, I don't know, Israel, where you might like speech controls a little better. We'll talk about the Al Jazeera story a little bit more and link that into the, of course, TikTok ban and a lot more with the anti-Semitism bill that is going over to the Senate. This is what is happening. They start in one way, they expanded into many other ways, and now we're even seeing so-called conservatives adopting a federal proposal to punish people for speech. Didn't they have enough when local people protesting for life were being apprehended and put, no, maybe they didn't. Didn't they have enough when the January 6th folks, some of them just entered the Capitol to use the bathroom or asked for directions, and they got imprisoned in solitary no, they didn't. They didn't speak up very much now, did they? A core group of people like Chip Roy did, like Thomas Massey did. The rest of them, those great free speech Democrats, I didn't see them. There are a few Democrats speaking up for free speech when it comes to Israel right now, which is kind of surprising, but I haven't heard very much as far as the incredibly obnoxious punishments and extrajudicial lack of due process for so many people. And that's what's happening to this woman right here, Heather Idoni. So that's it for the news flash, everybody. Let's check in and see what's happening with you. By the way, don't forget, if you've got links, if you've got comments and ideas, feel free to throw them in there at Rokfin. I want to say hi to Tom Cooper, TC, and Harry Hart are there. Carlos Rex, thank you. Good evening. Oh, yeah. Freedom fighters. I like it. Yes. You get the energy going. I appreciate that very much, Carlos. And over at Rumble, I see Freethinker 43 is over there. I dig that. And Freegan, I will send you a carton load of dancing bananas if I can find them someday. Someday there will be dancing bananas. I mean, we got all the genetic engineering. Eventually they're going to have mRNA jabs to create dancing bananas, right? They'll just walk right up from South and Central America, go right down into your breakfast bowl. You'll be all set. And, yes, Birdhouse. Yes, thank you very much. We're having a good day today. It's a real nice one. I hope you're having a great one too. All right, everybody, let's get to our first major issue. I think I've got this all set up. We need a theme for this one. Of course, we're going to be talking about two facets to, you got it, the welfare warfare state of the United States, spreading its tentacles, and of course, having so many allies all around the world.
Yeah. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing.
Unless you work in the military-industrial complex, it might not be good for your soul, but your wallet will be good while you're around on the earth. Afterwards, not so much.
I despise, 'cause it means destruction of innocent lives. One means tears, there's thousands of mothers have when their sons go to
Yeah, man. All right. Like I said, he takes James Brown and brings it to another level, I think, sometimes, man. And James is great, but, man, Edwin Starr's voice had that, huh? Man, he packed it in. First, let's check in with the antiwar.com and the first story that I've selected for you for the conspiracy tonight, which is going to open up things, and then we're going to go back and forth between Ukraine and then Israel, and then back to Antiwar and Dave DeCamp and give them some plugs. I hope folks please remember they're in their fund drive season. I gave to them last week, and I think they might still have the opportunity to double the donations at Antiwar. So if you like what they do, if you like Dave DeCamp's very, very humble approach to doing the news, and he really does so much and brings in things from so many people, check them out at antiwar.com. Let's go over to their site right now. Here it is. Jason Ditz actually wrote this one on the 5th. Yes, the 5th, Cinco de Mayo. Israel airstrike kills family of 4 in South Lebanon. Yeah. Israeli forces carried out an airstrike against the home of a Lebanese family in the border village of Maiz al-Jabal, killing a family of 4. We'll see how this is actually paralleled by events thanks to United States and NATO weapons heading to Ukraine, events in Russia over the weekend. I'll tell you about that in just a minute. Just think about this family of 4, both parents and 2 children, aged 12 and 21. The blood. No more celebrations for those folks. Not at all. But you better not criticize it. This anti-Semitism bill that they passed on the anniversary of the creation of the Illuminati, by the way, May Day. If you happen to speak up about this, that the killing of a family of 4 might be a bad thing, you too could be considered, anti-Semitic, even though these are Semitic peoples. I don't know how that all works, but evidently the government can define what is a Semitic person now, just like they can define male and female, and right and wrong, and theft, and all that stuff. Details are still emerging as to what exactly happened and why the house was struck. All indications are that those killed were civilians and that it was a civilian home. Israel has, as usual, declined to comment. Now, I know we go through these stories rather rapidly, especially coming in from the news flash. Then we go into the first story and stuff. So just, obviously, among many, it's this, when this stuff goes on so long, and jab deaths happening for folks, injuries and so on. People can become inured to this, and I hope that doesn't happen. Desensitize, that sort of thing, and it's a human tendency to try to handle the rough stuff and continue marching on. But let's think about this one. I'll slow it down a little bit, as Jason writes. This is not out of keeping with recent Israeli airstrikes in which houses, often referred to as Hezbollah terrorist infrastructure, are targeted and sometimes damaged, sometimes utterly destroyed. In recent months, over 1,000 homes across southern Lebanon, we're not talking the Gaza here, have suffered such devastation because, of course, Israel's just got to take care of that. This has forced some 100,000 Lebanese civilians who lived in the south to flee northward to escape the near constant attacks. And of course, we know that when Israel told the folks in the north of Gaza to flee to the south, the folks in Rafah are, of course, now being bombed. They've been bombed for a month and a half or 2 months now by the Israelis, and the Israelis are preparing a ground assault. And they have said, regardless of whether Hamas wants to negotiate, they're still going to conduct the ground assault and invade Rafah. So why would the Hamas folks be incentivized to negotiate? It's obviously the intention for the folks in Israel is to make sure that what does not happen, that there is not a ceasefire. They don't want it. They don't want it until they get rid of everybody that they want to get rid of there. Now, let's go back into Ukraine and talk a little bit about some of the things that have been happening in Ukraine. Talk about the economics of this United States continued push of this quixotic first expansion of NATO, which wasn't quixotic. They got where they wanted to be. They got right to the border of Ukraine. They absorbed many of the nations in the Iron Curtain, contrary to what James Baker promised the re-emerging Russian nation in the mid-90s. And of course, they've supplied weapons and opened biological and chemical weapons plants in Ukraine. They also worked to block Russian exports of energy in Crimea, even as they were trying to overthrow the government of Syria so they could stop a Russian natural gas pipeline going through Syria with the work of Assad's government. And of course, they conducted a false flag Maidan coup in late 2013 and imposed a government connected with neo-Nazis like the Sloboda Party and the Azov Battalion that then went and exterminated nearly 10,000 people in 9 years in the Crimean, in the Donbass region. So let's look at both the economic side of what's going on with the United States sanctions against Russia, the United States continued funding, now $61 billion more, going to go to the defense industrial complex, which has nothing to do with defense, the military industrial complex, and what is happening on the ground in Ukraine as they're becoming, as you saw in the flash, desperate, and they want to recruit younger and younger people and women. First, let's think about a couple of the things that the United States is funding and a couple of the things that are happening economically, which, of course, the United States free market economists predicted was going to happen. Let's check it out from RT.
Anybody, any self-respecting country which has its own reasons for the war currently at hand, like one between Russia and Ukraine, does not want any other interference, and that too threats emanating from the Western powers to be able to tell the Russians that they will deploy long-range systems to strike into the heartland of Russian mainland, and that too in support of Ukraine.
Well, one man's been killed and a young girl wounded after a Ukrainian drone hit a residential building in Russia's Belgorod region. Hours after another deadly attack in the area left 7 dead and 40 wounded. So our correspondent explains.
At least 7 people have been killed and 40 wounded in the latest Ukrainian attack on Russia's Belgorod region. That's according to local officials who said that kamikaze drones struck passenger vehicles, including those taking people to work in the early hours of Monday morning. Now, emergency services are on the scene at the moment, so that those casualty figures could indeed arise. Russia's investigative committee has opened a case into what has been described as a terror attack. Now, this was just one of a number of attacks that took place across the Belgorod region over the past 24 hours, with civilian homes, civilian infrastructure targeted and damaged, and a number of civilians among those wounded. Belgorod region, of course, sits on the border with Ukraine. It has been subjected to an increased number of attacks that have intensified over the last few months. These have included those drone strikes, missile strikes, and attempted incursions, along with the downing of the IL-76 passenger transport plane, which was making its way to Ukraine as part of an agreed prisoner swap. Now, these latest attacks came just a week after the British Foreign Minister, the unelected peer, Lord David Cameron, effectively green-lighted attacks inside Russian territory. And it comes after a report by a Russian human rights organization which said it had leaked information that senior NATO officials, NATO commanders, were directing and commanding operations in Ukraine. This includes General Antonio Aguto, who's been described as the shadow commander of the Ukrainian armed forces in the wake of the sacking of General Zaluzhny. Now, according to the report, it is him that has been planning and coordinating attacks on the Belgorod region as part of his plan to wreak havoc, saying that there are no civilians, only enemies. Now,
All right, so that is a tie-in to what we just heard about the innocent people killed in Lebanon, because, of course, it seems like the unspoken message here is that modern warfare has very little to do with eliminating the soldiers per se, and a lot more to do with threatening civilians and wiping out kids. That's what's been going on in Gaza. That's what's been going on with the Israeli occupation of Gaza for over 50 years. And that seems to be what the Ukrainian government is intending, despite Victoria Nuland being very careful to mention that the Russian military was in for some big surprises. Well, very clearly, the weapons that the United States has been giving to Ukraine, including cluster munitions, those weapons are not killing solely Russian soldiers. The Ukrainian government, as anybody has known for a long time, has been targeting civilians for ages there prior to the Russian invasion in 2022. That's part of the reason why the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, offered for his invasion, because the ethnically Russian people in the Donbass were being attacked by the Ukrainians. But there's a little more. Let's talk about the economics of this and mix that into the picture, because surprisingly, the Russian government still has a lot of takers and Russian businesses for its oil and energy exports. Oh, effectively, I almost forgot. There's one other item. That's right. Thank you very much. Thanks, team. Appreciate that. All right, there's one more item. Let me go to the military side of this just a little more here.
Attacks inside Russian territory, and it comes after a report by a Russian human rights organization which said it had leaked information that senior NATO officials, NATO commanders, were directing and commanding operations in Ukraine. This includes General Antonio Aguto, who's been described as the shadow commander of the Ukrainian armed forces in the wake of the sacking of General Zaluzhny. Now, according to the report, it is him that has been planning and coordinating attacks on the Belgorod region as part of his plan to wreak havoc, saying that there are no civilians, only enemies. Now, we stayed in the city of Voronezh, the Russian city, on Sunday night, and in the early hours of Monday morning, residents there received a text message from the local authorities warning of an imminent UAV attack. So the fear is now that with NATO's blessing, we're going to see more of these kind of attacks and more civilian casualties.
All right. So good stuff from RT. Now we get the opportunity to hop into the next piece. Let's see here. Make sure I've got it. Yes. Okay. Yeah, this is it. So let's check out what's been happening economically because of the United States, Western, NATO, British blockade. That isn't really a blockade. Of course, the Brits and the Germans are getting this stuff indirectly. The United States, with all its sanctions, I don't see that in the Constitution. Do you? Yeah, it's basically government threats against people doing business with other people. Yeah, it's kind of wild, and there is no declared war in the United States. So how they get away with these sorts of maneuvers, I don't know. But evidently it's because too few Americans actually bother to call these people to the mat for this. But let's see how this is just devastating the Russian economy, shall we?
Squeezed India's avenues of procuring oil from Venezuela to Iran, all under sanctions, but no more. Also, to put some data into perspective, in the last year, in India's import basket from 2023, April to Feb this year, India has imported around 36% of Russian crude.
Okay, so that was 36%. Just want to show you again from the time frame. So she goes back. India imported, the percentage was 36% of its imports of oil were Russian crude from April 2023 to March 2024. Compare that to about a year before, and she goes right into it.
This year, India has imported around 36% of Russian crude. Cut to 2021 to 2022, where India imported just about 2%. That's
okay, so that's quite a change, isn't it? Wow, must have been a dramatic demand change, huh? Yeah. Well, either that or perhaps they're making out some really good deals because the United States isn't demanding that oil anymore.
Around 1,700% jump in the oil imports. Also in the last 9 months or so, India has basically in April imported the highest amount of crude oil from Russia. So whether to buy Russian oil or not, that never really has been a subject, a topic of debate for India.
Remembering fallen heroes, the Immortal Regiment March was held in eastern India.
So there you go. I thought that was pretty good. And I want to give you one other item. Actually, I've got 2 other items about Ukraine, and I think you might enjoy this one. But it is not just funny, it's also substantive. And of course, we go back to what we saw earlier from RT. Here we are. Check it out.
Of course, when you run out of military-age men and they've swam across the rivers, they've escaped, they've disappeared to Europe, and why not? You have to move on to the kids and start indoctrinating them, a bit of grenade throwing, a bit of sea heiling, and soon you arrive at the last option, the bottom of the basket, and that's Ukraine's women. And they've been conscripted into the military now in large numbers. Check this out, how you run it. So when young Adolf comes home from school after a bit of sea heiling practice, Mama's just nowhere to be found. Guess where she is? On the conveyor belt. Of course, the Western media is absolutely doting over these beautiful Ukrainian women. Check it out. A little furry kitten, a beautiful Ukrainian woman. Oh, what's that? Oh, it's an SS Totenkopf, or Death's Head, which was the last thing many of the Jews, Poles, and Russians saw before they were shot to death and thrown in a pit in Galicia. So while little Taras is taught how to throw a grenade and say hello to his father returning from the front in a wheelchair, the women are also getting ready to go into the meat grinder. Something else is going on in Ukraine, and that is the fact that everybody in the West seems to want to help. They want to help more and more people be killed. And Canada has decided that it is going to make demining one of the most dangerous things you can do in the military, go looking for unexploded ordnance. A lot of people get killed doing this. They want to make it more fair. Let's get the women involved too. We really care.
If you're just watching, if you're just listening in audio, they were talking about trying to make the demining program in Ukraine more gender inclusive. How about I identify as somebody who doesn't do that? That would be awesome, wouldn't it? Yeah, we'll just finish off here.
Love you so much, Ukraine.
Yeah, Moscow Rules. Great show over at RT if you get a chance. Really, really witty stuff. Now let's head a little further south and get the update on what Israel is doing to Al Jazeera. Yes, but remember, don't dare watch any of those. They're just like TikTok. Got to get rid of them. And that's what Israel is doing. Yeah.
We're going to begin with breaking news from Israel, where the cabinet has voted to unanimously shut down Al Jazeera's operations in the country. That's according to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in a statement on X. Now, it's not clear when this decision is going to take effect. Earlier in April, the Israeli parliament approved a law that allows the government to ban broadcast channels it considers a threat to national security. Imran Khan is our correspondent in occupied East Jerusalem and preemptively recorded his final message in case of a potential ban.
If you're watching this pre-recorded report, then Al Jazeera has been banned in the territory of Israel. On April the 1st, the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, passed a law that allowed the Prime Minister to ban Al Jazeera. He's now enacted that law. Let me just take you through some of the definitions within the law. They banned our website, including anything that has the option of entering or accessing the website, even passwords that are needed, whether they're paid or not, and whether it's stored on Israeli servers or outside of Israel. The website is now inaccessible. They're also banning any device used for providing content. That includes my mobile phone. If I use that to do any kind of news gathering, then the Israelis can simply confiscate it. Our internet access provider, the guy that simply hosts AlJazeera.net, is also in danger of being fined if they host the website. The Al Jazeera TV channel completely banned. Transmission by any kind of content provider is also banned, and holding offices or operating them in the territory of Israel by the channel. Also, once again, any devices used to provide content for the channel can be taken away by the Israelis. It's a wide-ranging ban. We don't know how long it will be in place for, but it does cover this territory of the state of Israel. Imran Khan, Al Jazeera.
All right, there's that one. I'm going to hop over to our chat real quick, everybody, because I saw some great comments from folks, and I want to say hi to Balls City and also Freegan inside there, Freethinker 43. First, Balls City, thank you very much for hanging out. Great. And I don't think some of these political people, if you're stumbling over across this somewhere, or you're hearing this somewhere, or you hear about this, I just want to let you know that these are active people. And when you stir up their resentment, like my resentment, our resentment, we're not just sitting by. We're spreading the word, and people are becoming active to get around you and subvert you in any way possible, especially the long term for our own soul's sake. So we're trying to find ways to make sure that you don't get our money, that you don't fund the warfare welfare state with our money, that you don't infringe on the rights of people who are protesting for life. We're trying to figure these ways out, and we're going to disconnect from you, as Gary Newman said, as much as possible. And if it comes down to it and you attack us, we will have the right to self-defense. So I just want to mention, Freegan, thank you very much for your comment about Canada. Freegan said, I have always detested Canada, the embracing of slavery to liberalism. Yep. And there's more. Says here, the U.S. turned communard fast. I find Canadians, says Freegan, I find Canadians in general to be far too stupid and evil to bother attempting enlightening them. Rogue Statesman says, I feel helpless, man. Don't. And Rogue Statement says, I completely detest what my country has become in Canada. I'm sorry. Boy, that's rough. That is rough. And it was, it became very manifest during the lockdowns. And the fact that nothing's been done to those criminals, they should be in prison. Not a question. Chrystia Freeland, anybody who backed them, all criminal elements. I mean, look, as an anarchist, I try to explain to people that the existence of the state is a criminal act. Those people who support the state are engaged in acts of theft, coercion, and threats in order for the state to exist. There is no authority to the state. There is no legitimacy to the state. It is a group of people claiming legitimate authority over you, and you haven't given your consent. Ergo, obviously, QED, they have no authority over you, right? And it's like a thief saying, I've got authority over you. Over in Rokfin, Taylor Saunders, Harry Hart says, see Kyle. See that guy, Kyle? And Taylor Saunders, yes. Taylor Saunders says, thanks. Not all of us are stupid. All right. So there you go. You guys will have to form like your own little province to get away from the sheeple, And I think generally everybody is pretty smart. Everybody applies themselves in different ways, right? And this is one of the problems with the state. The state removes itself when people vote. They're generally voting to make somebody else do something, and they're not feeling the negative effects directly based on their own decisions, the way they would feel the negative effects if they, say, bought a bad product or hired somebody who did a bad job for them or something like that, right? So that's one of the problems with statism. At least as Tolkien said, and as Hans Hermann Hoppe has sort of paraphrasing, at least with a monarchy, if you have a monarch, you know who the enemy is, right? And especially in the early medieval period, the monarch was really sort of the final adjudicator. The monarch grew and grew in power and started to hand out edicts and diktats and things like that. But for a long time, especially in a tribal system, the chieftain was not the one who commanded everybody. He was the one to whom people turned when they had conflict within tribes or in tribal things. That's the way it happened in Ireland. That's the way it happened in Viking Age Iceland, except in Iceland, they added the Gardner system, which was you could go to the Viking temple and you could adjudicate something inside the temple. Everybody had a right to go there. You could just choose a temple, and they competed against each other for the best adjudication systems. So, you can check out some of the information on that in David Friedman's book called The Machinery of Liberty. He's Milton Friedman's son, and he's an anarcho-capitalist. So We covered the Ukrainian women's story and the symbols. And I'm not sure if did you see like a little heart that said Heart Lindsay on their chest garb? I don't know. I thought I saw that right next to the pro-Nazi stuff, because Lindsay loves that sort of stuff. Like biker stuff and the hats and the Nazi stuff. It's like he's into all that leather gear and everything. And he loves the skulls and all that. I mean, that's why he was hanging out with the Sloboda Party, the Nazi party, when he was helping to put together the Maidan coup and hanging out there as they put in the Yatsenyuk government after they toppled Yanukovych. Yeah, he was hanging out with that guy. What's his name? Tyanibok from the Svoboda Party. And he also is in that video with all the military guys who also were associated with the Azov Battalion. And John McCain and Amy Klobuchar are there too. So I guess they must be into that sort of kink too, And I don't mean the kinks either. Now, we know that Al Jazeera has been banned from Israel. And because, Israel is a contemporary Western society, right? They're all, and in order to remain a contemporary Western society, obviously, it's very clear they have to ban speech. They got to protect the Western freedom of Israel. You know what I'm saying? Right? It's just like the United States, got to protect. And so therefore, shut down TikTok, right? And continue to fund more military bases being built in the South Pacific and more military weaponry to go to Ukraine, because, it's good. It's if it even gets to Ukraine. It'll get in the pockets of the military industrial complex contractors. But, if you got some family members who are there, then maybe you want to ask them, rather than taking that money and, putting it in the bank, maybe they want to get away from those businesses and try to, give some money to a church or to help people or something like that as a way to make amends for what they've done investing in the military industrial complex. But because, it hasn't been about defense since the end of World War II. Now let's look at a very religious guy who I don't know. I don't want to prejudice you. In fact, I'll hold my comments back and let you in the conspiracy offer your comments about this guy. David Knight brought this man up today, and I'm glad he did, because I've been watching this guy, Brent Leatherwood. It always reminds me of that Grace Jones song, Warm Leatherette. Warm Leatherette. Did she do that with, I can't remember if that was a solo thing or she did that with Brian Eno or something like that. But this guy has taken it unto himself because, he's all in favor of the meek shall inherit the earth and stuff. So, of course, he's got a giant revivalist church, which makes tons and tons of money. And he's got so much about what he's doing. He just thinks it's very important that he go to the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. and show support for a foreign nation state. Yeah, that's very Christian, right? To make sure that your speech is silenced. That's definitely, that's excellent. Yeah, definitely right. Geez, I wonder. Anyway, I was just wondering if they had statutes against criticizing some of the ancient Israelites, what might have happened to somebody who maybe was critical of the ancient Israelites. I don't know. It's like, I'm not sure. But as a Christian, I kind of am thinking about that, and I can't seem to get it out of my mind as I see a Christian talking about support for a nation state that's slaughtering tens of thousands of people every few months, starting on October 7th, October 8th, and now, of course, is following up 50 years, almost more, 70 years of oppression. Let's hear what this guy had to say on his trip to Washington. Yeah.
I'm Brent Leatherwood, president of the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission of the Southern Baptist Convention. Behind me is the building I just came out of, which is the Israeli embassy here in America. And we met today with various members of the staff of the ambassador to reaffirm our support as Southern Baptists for Israel and Israel's right not only to defend itself, but to exist. And
all right, so let's just stop there, do a quick review. Since, of course, I went to film school and, got all those great skills, I'm going to be saying what's probably obvious to everybody and has been obvious from the start of this. He's wearing all those wonderful Israeli colors, and the printing is done in white and blue. Isn't that fantastic? That's solidarity. Solidarność, Israeli style. All right. He'll be hanging out there on the wharfs and the piers. Oh, maybe he won't. Maybe he'll be out there on the pier that they're building so that, of course, they can keep delaying and give money to the military and have no boots on the ground, just on the pier and have them shooting back. Totally constitutional. It's a great idea. So he had to go there to show the solidarity with the people of Israel, and he had to show his support, you got it, for one of the most blatant attacks on free speech in the history of this country. And by the way, the elimination of Al Jazeera from Israel is a lot like the Sedition Act. Don't criticize Benjamin Netanyahu, just like you couldn't criticize John Adams. But John Adams wasn't a mass murderer, at least. There was that.
Very clear. You can probably hear the music behind me. Before, we were worried about even being able to tape this video because there was a loud siren that was playing. And that's because the folks who work in the embassy are being subjected to continual harassment by sympathizers of Hamas and other terrorist groups.
Okay. By the way, the song, I wrote the name of the song down. I think it was something like, like This Land Is Your Land, or it was like a peace song that was playing in the background. So that's his statement, all in favor of the U.S. government defining for us what is anti-Semitic and what is not. How about the very act of the U.S. government defining any word and then possibly coming up with some sort of punishment about it? How about that's sort of the stopping point? That's like off the blocks. You've got the chain attached and you just don't run any farther, right? Oh, what's this thing? It's the chain of the First Amendment. That's whacked out. I don't know how that works. Sure hope we can get rid of that someday. Well, they started back in 1798 with the Sedition Act. So they had a real early start of it, those centralizers. So that's the man who's quite the Baptist, right? Yeah, all self-important. Let me get your thoughts on it before we go any further. Do you think I'm not giving this guy enough slack? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I see. Yes, and yes, I know. Pfizer's colors are white and blue as well. And Carlos Rex mentions protect Pfizer, protect Israel, protect Ukraine, protect the United States corruption. There you go. We're all set. It's the USSA. I like that. That's good. That's good stuff, Carlos, over at Rokfin. Thanks, buddy. And Rogue Statesman, thanks for being there. I have to re-up the comments here. We see okay, let's see. We see this inside Rumble. And feel free to lay your comments down. I'll get right back over. I'm going to check out YouTube as well. Got to do that. Thanks for being everywhere, you guys. You're just awesome. Oh, they're talking about some biological stuff. I would only be jumping in the middle of it. Don't know what's going on. But by the way, Rogue Statesman, yeah, when I lived in Burnaby, I thought British Columbia was absolutely beautiful. And I looked up, I think I might have mentioned, I looked up that bookstore that I used to go to on it wasn't Lougheed Highway. It was north of that, it's a few blocks north of Lougheed Highway running parallel. The bookstore is still there across from the Safeway. It's fantastic. It's great. I want to give them a call, see how they're doing. Feel free to drop your comments in YouTube. I don't know if I'm doing it right or whatever. I'll try to check those out. And also, Brandon. Hey, Brandon Bennett, thank you for being there. Hey, Guard, great to see you. Brandon, thank you. I'm a little bit late for seeing you there inside the X chat, and I love it. We're all expatriates, right? Or maybe in the future. Let's now check out some more information about how surprising it is to see some people actually standing up for free speech. However, please keep in mind that there is still a lot of hypocrisy here from some of the things that some of these people has said. You remember last week, just to make sure that the news cycle doesn't just pass by like a stream and we only look at the new flotsam and jetsam coming down. Don't forget that we did see Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez voting against the anti-Semitic speech thing, right? However, and she spoke up to say she was against this new tranche of weapons going to Israel. But she voted for the omnibus budget, which already included another $4 billion of weapons going to Israel. And that was just a few weeks before. So I don't know what happens in her brain to get the wheels going to say, well, I'm a little behind speed. And I don't know whether she'll be consistent, but I figured I better just bring that up, right? Now, let's see the inconsistency of some other people who are all in favor of things like the FCC to control your speech and fining of what they find indecent, because, of course, they're going to get the money. They're going to retain the power. And didn't seem to have a problem with the Biden administration shutting you down when it came to speech about things like the jabs and stuff like that. No problem. Didn't have a problem with the FBI telling Twitter, hey, don't allow people to post about Hunter Biden's laptop hard drive actually being authentic. They went along with the ride of the canard of the Russian interference and the Russian disinformation nonsense, which actually was disinformation created by people connected to John Brennan and the Hillary Clinton campaign and others. Well, at least right now, some of these people, and I do have to mention their hypocrisy, okay? But I don't expect that they're going to be consistent in the future, but they are saying some things about this new anti-Semitism bill as it comes out of the House and goes into the U.S. Senate. And it's exactly what Chuck Schumer has wanted for a long time. Don't forget, everybody, under Schumer's leadership a couple of years ago, they passed a statute on the in the U.S. Congress, and it was signed by the president, that said any business with contracts with the United States can't involve itself with an embargo of Israelis, of the Israeli government, I should say. Similar to DeSantis signing in Israel 2 statutes that punish people first if they engage in some sort of graffiti or defacement defacing of someone else's property, if it has what can be perceived by the state as being anti-Semitic, otherwise known as anti-Israeli government policy, because they'll lump it all together. If it can be perceived that way by the government, they will get a harsher punishment. Also, it banned a year plus ago, it banned the dissemination of anti-Zionist, that would be anti-policies of the state of Israel. So as an anarchist, I would be in trouble because I'm anti every policy of every state because I'm anti-state. So on a philosophical basis, I guess I would be a renegade automatically. Styx could sing a song about me, right? But he made it a punishable felony offense if you're on a campus and handing out information or speaking up against the state of Israel. And he signed it in Israel, along with the guy who proposed both pieces of legislation, a former New Yorker who has big money coming to him from Israeli lobbies. Also wanted to mention, while we're talking about Florida, there are rumors that Marco Rubio might be the VP choice for Donald Trump. If that's the case, Donald Trump is showing that he's even more foolish oftentimes than many people thought he could be, because that is going to be the worst choice he could possibly come up with, other than say, picking Joe Biden as his running mate. Yeah. So let's get into the surprising, and we showed some footage from this man last time, the surprising Jerry Nadler.
Anti-Semitism.
Oh, sorry. He's talking about anti-Semitism here. Let me go back here for you. Okay, so here we go.
Anti-Semitism, and I am as attuned as anyone to threats and bigotry aimed at Jewish people. I will take lectures from no one about the need for vigorous efforts to fight anti-Semitism on campus or anywhere else. I am also a deeply committed Zionist who firmly believes in Israel's right to exist as a homeland for the Jewish people. But as someone who is also a longtime champion of protecting freedom of speech, I must oppose this misguided bill. While there is much in the bill I agree with, its core provision would put a thumb on the scale in favor of one particular definition of anti-Semitism to the exclusion of all others, to be used when the Department of Education assesses claims of anti-Semitism on campus. This definition, adopted by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, or IHRA, includes, quote, contemporary examples of anti-Semitism, close quote. The problem is that these examples may include protected speech in some contexts, particularly with respect to criticism of the state of Israel. To be clear, I vehemently disagree with the sentiments toward Israel expressed in those examples. And too often criticism of Israel does, in fact, take the form of virulent anti-Semitism. Many Jewish students no longer feel safe on campus, and some colleges have not done nearly enough to protect them. But while this definition and its examples may have useful applications in certain contexts, by effectively codifying them into Title VI, this bill threatens to chill constitutionally protected speech. Speech that is critical of Israel alone does not constitute unlawful discrimination. By encompassing purely political speech about Israel into Title VI.
All right, so let me pause it there, everybody, because now the first inference for some folks that I've seen commenting on this is, and I don't know why they thought this, they thought that the bill only applies like Title IX to the 1964, the amendments to the 1964 Civil Rights Act. So as you know, last week in the news, a lot of so-called red state attorneys general, I believe 15 of them, were bringing suit against the Biden administration for the new Title IX changes. Title IX being that you have to have equal provisions inside colleges and schools, high schools and things like that, for women and men, for sports and various things that they say, well, women go for this, guys go for this, so you have to have equal things like that. Universities like Hillsdale College and Grove City College protested and said, if we do equal sports teams for women, we're going to be losing money because they don't attract anybody. We've tried it. Well, that has led to the colleges, Hillsdale and Grove City, saying we're not going to take any federal money. And the key here is the government dangles the money and they say, if you take this money, you must comply this way. Okay, so if you're taking state education money, you've got to conform to Title IX. And then if you're taking other types of money, like highway money or Medicare money or anything like that, they attach riders that say you've got to conform to Title IX as well. Okay, so at first blush, some people are saying, oh, what Nadler is saying here is it's only an if-then statement. If you're going to take federal money, then you have to make sure that people conform to the speech codes now, not just for women and men of sports teams or something like that, but the definition of anti-Semitism now. Now, for some people, that's finally going too far. Right? They're finally seeing that there's a problem, but they probably aren't applying that problem to the universe of problems of A, the federal government handing out money, and B, the federal government telling people at universities how they have to run things. Okay. But again, if they're handing out the money, then conceptually, can't we imagine that some of the heads of these universities could then be called to task by the feds who might say, hey, we're handing you a bunch of money. You should do things the way we want you to do things. And again, we get to the tragedy of the commons, where on those common greens that the government has now made public property because they're subsidizing them, they can't be managed the way that they could be managed if they were real private property. And that, of course, goes back to the Marsh v. Alabama decision of 1946, which even assumed that private property that might be open to people crossing it or visiting it is somehow de facto public property, and the government can tell people how it has to be run. It opened the gates to, instead of just the government handing out money and claiming we're going to attach riders to it, invading real private property and telling people we're going to tell you how to run your private property. It is the utmost conceit to say, I know how your property has to be run. And it also is illegitimate to say, well, you're doing that private property, you're operating it for that reason, which I find acceptable. So yes, you can keep that closed and operate it based on your will. But over here, you're operating your private property with this intent. And so therefore, I find that I'm going to invade you and tell you how to run it. It's not my place. It's their property. I don't have a gang force moral authority to tell any of these people how to run their property. But of course, if they're taking money, then what happens? They apply the caveats. So a lot of people think that this was just about Title IX, this subsection 6, right? Like the trans stuff for Biden saying now you're going to have to supply sports under Title IX to guys who are pretending to be women, so they'll have to go into the women's locker room. Now they're using the word anti-Semitic to apply to actual words or protest rallies on college campuses because they receive money. But it's more than that. It's more than the provisions of Title IX. Going back, again, that's Title IX in the amendments to the 1964 Civil Rights Act. And much of the Civil Rights Act was good. It brought about things that are supposed to happen if you believe that voting is good, equal voting for people, right? but it also took the 46 Marsh v. Alabama decision and it turned it into statute saying that private businesses must be open to anybody. So again, if you are a non-racist person and you have a racist scumbag who wants to come into your place and wear his Nazi regalia, can you throw him out or not? If you got a member of the Azov battalion coming in with Lindsey Graham, can you say, no, thank you? This isn't a kinky place. Leave us alone. Or do you have to accept that minority group? This is where people like Walter Williams, God rest his soul, did such fantastic work to show people, look, I'd rather know about if somebody is racist. I don't want the state to control that guy's property. I want the market to tell that guy whether what he's doing is comporting with what other people want. And of course, as I said, if you are then a customer walking by a shop and some minority skinhead owns it, do you then have to give him business? Or are you discriminating against him? Leave people alone. You can't have any sort of moral authority to push somebody else around and make him live his life the way you want to. That is it. And the state is the machine that does it with all sorts of nefarious excuses and dumb, fuzzy, soap sudsy kinds of ideas. They're ridiculous and they smother real freedom and choice, and they don't allow people to show what they really want. They don't allow society to grow and show how it is changing. And of course, they reaffirm certain biases and they pick up on people due to cultural Marxism that will play the game for them and allow the state to grow even more powerful. Just like up in Canada with the pronoun thing in 2016 with C-16 that was passed in 2017. You don't say the right pronoun, government can shut you down. Well, many people thought that this anti-Semitism bill that came out of the House, and of course, we heard that the wartime speaker felt so strongly about this. Mr. Wartime Speaker. I guess he's going to hang out in the bunker with Churchill, right? Maybe he's a eugenicist the way Churchill was too. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe Churchill changed his ways. I don't know. But he spoke at the first eugenics conference. That was one of his first big speeches. Was at the World Eugenics Conference in England. But needless to say, this bill doesn't just apply to Title IX. So let's get a good overview of this right now and give you, but before I do want to give one compliment to another guy. I have a couple pieces here from Bernie Sanders. Here's Bernie.
They are out there not because they are pro-Hamas. They are out there because they are outraged by what the Israeli government is now doing in Gaza, which is bringing unbelievable harm, not just to the terrorist organization of Hamas, but to the entire Palestinian people. And that's why these anti-war demonstrators are out there. They do not want to see a situation continue where 110,000 Palestinians out of 5% of the population have been killed or wounded, where children now face starvation. Hundreds of thousands of children face starvation because Israel is refusing to allow humanitarian aid to get to where it has to go. Demonstrations is what, and the right to dissent, the right to protest, that is what the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States is all about. That's what, in fact, makes you a free country.
All right. So again, because we just saw Bernie, we just saw Jerry Nadler, again, a bookmark to what we heard from those guys at the start. I mentioned, yes, they're saying good things, but we don't want to let the visuals and the speeches allow us to forget that both of those guys voted for the omnibus budgets. And the omnibus budgets included $4 billion to go to Israel to blast apart those people. Okay. So at least somebody could ask some questions of Bernie Sanders about that and say, hey, Bernie, look, I've been actually feeling much more comfortable with the things you're saying. Could we just have a conversation about this? Tell me what is going on. Tell me, A, how you can allow these two things to comport, and B, how, if you do allow them to comport, they can comport with your U.S. constitutional oath. And then, I would get upset because I know that he's not going to give me the straight answer. And it's tough because you walk away. You hear this all the time. Every politician you run into virtually does this, except maybe Ron Paul or Thomas Massie. Now, let's get into the breakdown on the bill. All right. And for that, I want to go to Lauren Chen. Lauren Chen did a fantastic job on this. And here she is. I've got it big screen. I might make it a little bit smaller. We'll see. She just did a great job here. Here we go.
A bill because it is just that important. Now, as you can see here, we have HR 6090, the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act of 2023, which, by the way, passed the House with flying colors. Majority from both the Democrats and the Republicans voted in favor of this. The time that I'm filming this video, this has not yet gone to the Senate, but I expect that it will be widely supported there as well. What I want to point out here is that its sponsor is Representative Michael Lawler, a Republican from New York. And the reason why I'm discussing this bill, this act, isn't just because it raises awareness about anti-Semitism. It's because it would actually make it a violation of the Civil Rights Act if you do things like imply that the Jews killed Jesus, or even if you try to compare what the IDF is currently doing in Gaza to the actions of the Nazis during the Holocaust. So let's take a look at what this act actually says. It says to provide for the consideration of a definition of anti-Semitism set forth by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance for the enforcement of federal anti-discrimination laws concerning education programs or activities and for other purposes. So the way that this is being pitched and sold to people is that this act is specifically needed and meant to target anti-Semitism in education, especially higher education. You know, this is coming on the heels of all these protests like at Columbia University about the Israel-Palestine conflict. But the reason why this is actually so much broader is that this bill doesn't just enable the federal government to, let's say, withhold federal funding from an institution if they are found to be violating the Civil Rights Act by engaging in a definition of anti-Semitism that the IHRA has set forth, which we will get to in just a second. It is also so broad that it means that almost anybody could be found of violating the Civil Rights Act if they are engaged in anti-Semitism, at least according to this one NGO's definition of it. Because to be clear, this act invokes the Civil Rights Act a lot throughout its text, and the Civil Rights Act, by the way, if we need a refresher, prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin, and that covers.
So we're going to pause it there, everybody. So this is why I refer to C-16 and C-17, because the Civil Rights Act, as I mentioned, and this is where we get to the 1946 Marsh v. Alabama thing, this is why this is so massively, massively important that people understand how devilish the 1946 Marsh v. Alabama decision was, how it completely flipped over the concept of private property, and how that portion of the 1964 Civil Rights Act has been used as a lever, a wedge, to be able to now get in and literally, under anti-Semitism, do what they did in Canada for pronouns. This is what's going on. People have no concept of how massive this is in U.S. history. This is the biggest anti-speech legislation and move literally since the Sedition Act of 1798. Nothing compares to this. Now, there was plenty of stuff like the Espionage Act. That was bad enough. But this one literally will apply to private businesses. Anything the government considers to be so-called public property, because the government has the power, and they'll do whatever the heck they want based on the 1946 Marsh v. Alabama decision. I have been trying to warn people about this for so long. Even when I write about stuff like the Canadian C-16 bill, I ponder. I don't even know if I've put it in there. I try to think about that problem of the United States and how it was put into the 1964 Civil Rights Act. It's called the public accommodations portion. And this is the lever. This is it right here. They're getting into speech controls inside private businesses. So a big-time pro-Zionist person could come into a shop of a Palestinian family in New York City and claim that that business was discriminating against them because they might have a sign up that says Free Palestine. Now, the only thing that will probably happen about this is if it's challenged in the Supreme Court, they'll say, okay, we're going to negate that part of the 64 Civil Rights Act, that part of the addition to this. But that's all they'll do. They won't go back to the origins of it. They won't go back to the Americans with Disabilities Act under George H.W. Bush that said, oh, if you're a business person, you have to open your doors to wheelchair people in wheelchairs, right? Well, if the business person doesn't have the money to afford a ramp, then whose responsibility is it? How about you leave me alone? And if I can't get the customers to give me their customs, then I'm out money. It's not somebody else's place to tell me how to run my property, under what conditions. Then it opens up a Pandora's box, and you get exactly right here. Anarchism doesn't accept this. Anarchism doesn't allow the moral breach of assuming for somebody else how to do his or her business. If you want to run a totally kosher deli, you're cool. Been to them in New York. You want to run a Palestinian restaurant or whatever, a business, an office that only caters to Palestinian people, that only caters to black people or Alaskan whatever, natives. I don't care. It's totally cool. Because it's not my moral prerogative to tell you how to run your life. It's so arrogant and assumptive. It's just amazing. This is why I had to make sure I got this out here for you. We'll check out more. Here we go.
In public places, in places of employment, like with hiring, firing, and promoting. So yeah, if you think that this act is just going to be used to, for example, defund college campuses for not keeping Jewish students safe, you're being willfully ignorant, all right? The phrase here, and for other purposes, is doing a lot of heavy lifting, and it basically gives them carte blanche to use this definition to punish whomever they want. And we have more to talk about, but first, I do want to give a quick shout out to Clearly Pure, which you guys may know.
Just pause this here and I'll go forward. I should mention, like, oh yeah, she's got Clearly Pure, because I'm showing off her advertisement and so on and so forth. So, but yeah, she does a really good job. Okay, so we'll go to the end of the commercial and we'll continue. Here we go.
$5, and all that information is going to be down in the description. But let's read a little bit more into this law. It says it is the sense of Congress that Title VI of the Civil Rights Act prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, and national origin in programs and activities receiving federal financial assistance. And then to that, it also says that Congress finds the following: anti-Semitism is on the rise in the U.S., and that the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, the IHRA, working definition of anti-Semitism is a vital tool which helps individuals understand and identify the various manifestations of anti-Semitism. And when I've heard people defend this dumpster fire of an act, I often hear them say stuff like, well, of course you want to protect Jewish students and Jewish people, right? Who doesn't want Jewish people to feel safe? Here's the thing, guys. It is already illegal to be violent against Jewish people, or really any people, regardless of their race, religion, you name it. You don't need extra laws to do what is already illegal. Like, you are already not allowed to harm a Jewish person in any way, shape, or form. Obviously, of course it is. This law is not about protecting Jewish people. This law is about protecting certain feelings. And for that, and
it's about protecting the state. And it's about establishing a speech code in the United States.
Completely against it. So let's look at what exactly this IHRA definition of anti-Semitism includes.
And the IHRA definition it's not solid, obviously, it's changing. And we know that if it were solid, it would still be an absolute affront to anybody who believes in peaceful coexistence with one's neighbor.
Because it is so broad, it will shock you. As you can see here, we have the International Holocaust Remembrance site, and they have a working definition of anti-Semitism. And now most of us, when asked to define anti-Semitism, would probably say something like hatred of Jews, which I think is a pretty good definition. That is not what the IHRA uses, though. You see, they're a lot more ephemeral in their definition of anti-Semitism. They say that anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews, which may be expressed as hatred toward Jews. What exactly does this mean? We're talking about a perception of Jews that is maybe hatred to them, but not necessarily. But to nail down what exactly is or is not anti-Semitism, they actually provide a useful list of what they call contemporary examples of anti-Semitism in public life, the media, etc. And I do want to point out that these are examples of anti-Semitism that were given, but anti-Semitism is not limited to just these examples. So first off, we have calling for, aiding, or justifying the killing or harming of Jews in the name of a radical ideology or an extremist view of religion. That, to me...
So I just want to pause that there. So again, this is how the IHRA defines it, but as they say, they include but are not limited to. So it doesn't even matter that they're making up a list. It doesn't matter. It's infinite. They could describe anything as anti-Semitic. anything not limited to.
I think is a fair definition of anti-Semitism. I would include that there. Bada bing, bada boom. We are done. I still don't think it's fair for this to be part of the government's purview in any way, shape, or form because, you know, actual harming or killing of Jews is already illegal. We don't need to be monitoring people's thoughts, even if we disagree with them. But the next parts of the list are where things get really crazy. We also have included in this definition of anti-Semitism, which, yes, will now potentially be used if it passes the Senate, the act, to determine whether people are guilty of violating the Civil Rights Act, making mendacious, dehumanizing, demonizing, or stereotypical allegations about Jews. So even stereotypes are anti-Semitic now. Oh, you know, you want to make a comment about how a lot of Jews tend to be, I don't know, in the banking industry. Careful, you might be violating the Civil Rights Act. Some of the examples that they have of, you know, Jewish stereotypes are especially, but not exclusively, the myth about a world Jewish conspiracy or of Jews controlling the media, economy, government, or social institutions. And it's like, okay. We've just in the United States seen this bill pass that basically makes it unacceptable to criticize parts of the Jewish religion, Jewish people, or Jewish country. And simultaneously included in the things you're not allowed to criticize is the idea that Jews, you know, do exercise disproportionate control of the media and the government. Okay. All right. Next up, we also have under anti-Semitism accusing Jews as a people of being responsible for real or imagined wrongdoing committed by a single Jewish person or group. This I could maybe see being included in anti-Semitism, but the thing is, we would never accept a bill that tried to argue it was Islamophobic to accuse all Muslims of, you know, being complicit in Islamic terrorist attacks. Like, we would never accept that. And this is crazy here. Another example of anti-Semitism denying the facts, scope, or even mechanisms like gas chambers or intentionality of the genocide of the Jewish people at the hands of the National Socialist Germany and its supporters and accomplices during World War II. So basically...
So, of course, you can't have any debate. You can't have any discussion, even if you're wrong. You can't be wrong. You can't be wrong. And, you know, goodness knows that they don't like National Socialism. That is the socialist state of Israel and the increasingly nationally socialist fascist state of the United States. We'll get a little bit more here from Lauren Chen. Here we go.
We are including Holocaust denial as part of what the U.S. government would deem discriminatory against Jews and a violation of the Civil Rights Act. These are the type of laws that we see in Europe. And I want to be clear, it's not just denying the Holocaust that they are including here. You can't even raise questions about the scope or the mechanisms. Oh, you think a couple fewer Jews died during the Holocaust? Careful. That's sounding very anti-Semitic. You're questioning the mechanisms. Did they really have such and such? Careful. Sounding anti-Semitic. Look, I'm not into World War II. I don't know a lot about, what went on in concentration camps, aside from what I was taught in high school. But look, if you are right, if the facts are on your side, you do not need to censor and legally penalize people for questioning or challenging or dismaying your narrative. This is not what free societies do. This is not what societies who prize the truth above all do. You are only making yourselves look guilty and complicit in undermining actual bedrock Western values here by supporting this. This isn't going to make Jewish students on campuses any safer. All this is going to do is give ammo to the people who do believe that Jews control the government, because it's looking very much like it is now off limits to challenge or question anything to do with the Jewish people.
Exactly. And of course, John Stuart Mill, when he wrote On Liberty in the late 1800s, was trying to explain to people it was not a philosophical text about the best government to have or anything like that, the way John Locke was putting something together. He was coming at it in a sort of ex post facto fashion. As a utilitarian who had seen the mistakes of some of the other utilitarians with their greatest good for the greatest number approach, which is really not about freedom necessarily, and of course assumes that somebody else can define what's good for you, which is a tautology, of course. It's amazing how some philosophers don't figure this stuff out. It's just simple logic. But John Stuart Mill approached it in a different way. And he said, look, Most nation states around the world have adopted the American model of coming up with a constitution, especially Western states. And he said, but what I'm finding now is they have achieved great things as far as their standards of livings are concerned and so on and so forth. But I'm finding that many people in the society are starting to frown on things like free speech and property rights and things like that. And so when it came to speech, he was saying, look, if you have the state prohibit speech, then how can you exercise your point and show how strong and valid that it is, right? And he said, it's interesting. He said a lot of the newest religions are the ones that are most interested in fervently engaging in debate. They don't have power, but they want to prove their points. The ones that have power don't want to engage in debates. And he says, and that's a problem, because the less they engage in debate, the less often people will hear their arguments, and the more often they will hear things outside of the normal spheres, which is exactly what's going to happen. It's going to be looking like, well, the people in power are being influenced by the Jews, and there you go. You're off to the races. So I thought that was a very good job. Lauren Chen, if you want to check her out, there she is. Now, there's even more, and I want to show you even more good stuff thanks to Savvy Sabs. I think I've got this all set up. Yeah, Savvy is ready to go. Oh, but before I do, I want to show you some of the responses at LifeSite News. There's a very good piece at LifeSite. Yeah, I want to go to LifeSite News real quick. So this is some of the GOP responses. LifeSite News has GOP lawmakers, I don't like that term, statute writers, conservative influencers slam insane Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, warn it could silence Christians. So remember back a few years ago when you heard that, Germany has a law saying that you can't question that's the Holocaust? That's crazy. That would never happen here. Yeah, as Kolchak says, try to tell yourself it couldn't happen here. Well, here is one of the guys who's very much in favor of this sort of thing, Ben Shapiro. Remember when he was all Mr. Free Speech? Yeah, well, he's made his money off of looking like he's an alternative voice, rubbing up against the mainstream. Now he is using the state to get his way. Oh, what a shock for a conservative. Christians aren't anti-Semitic for saying Jewish leaders helped get Jesus killed, Daily Wire commentator Ben Shapiro said. Conservatives, including Ben Shapiro, are warning a recently passed bill ostensibly aimed at addressing anti-Semitism could lead to universities squelching the speech of Christians. Is he really speaking up in favor of free speech? Using the symbols and images associated with classic anti-Semitism, example, claims of Jews killing Jesus or blood libel, to characterize Israel or Israelis, could be considered anti-Semitism under the legislation that was rushed through without the normal procedure of allowing debate and amendments. Republican-backed House Resolution 6090, we just saw the text, passed the U.S. House of Representatives on Wednesday. It is in response to ongoing protests, sometimes violent, on college campuses. And as I said, things become more and more muddy as the days go by. Infiltrators get there, people's anger pops up, and then, of course, violence erupts. You don't know who started which side. And yeah, curiously, when I wanted to mention too, when we saw on video the Mr. Leatherette standing out in front of the Israeli embassy. There we go. There he is. You know what he didn't mention, which is, I know, kind of weird. He said that, the Israeli embassy there is surrounded by protesters. Again, sort of like that guy, Shai Davidi of Columbia University, not acknowledging his own double standards. Curiously, Brent Leatherwood, or Warm Leatherette, as I said, if you want to take the Grace Jones approach to the song, he didn't seem to recognize that he's upset that the Israeli embassy might be surrounded by protesters. But at least the Israeli embassy members can come and go. They can leave. They have access to water. They have access to electricity and food. What's been the status in Gaza for decades? Oh, yeah, that's wild, huh? And at least the people who are protesting outside the Israeli embassy aren't going in kidnapping members of the Israeli embassy and holding them without any trial, but claiming that they're operating based on statutes and the law because they somehow think that they're criminal elements. You know, like, let's say some teenage kid goes into the Israeli embassy. They're not taking that teenage kid away and holding him for half a year or a year, the way the Israelis have been doing year after year after year to hundreds of people from Gaza. That's what this guy seems to not kind of grasp as just one facet of the incredible tower of immorality that he doesn't seem to understand. Maybe it's a Tower of Babel and he just doesn't speak the language of morality or Christian virtues. I guess he doesn't get it. But to go back to Mr. Shapiro, and this is the question I'd like to ask Mr. Shapiro, why, if he is in favor of free speech, did he try to put a gag order on Candace Owens about their dispute over the fact that she doesn't stand for the United States sending weapons to Israel? Why does he stand for the United States preventing me from having my choice not to pay Israel to kill people? There's a bit of a double standard here, and I get the impression that Ben Shapiro has sort of read the tea leaves on this anti-Semitism speech thing. And when it comes to me being able to express the fact that I don't support the state of Israel with weapons transfers, I don't have that choice. And when it comes to Candace Owens saying Christ is king, she doesn't have that choice either. She can't continue to be employed. And even as they tried to say that they were going to set up a debate between her and Ben Shapiro, they were trying to get a gag order on her. Now, some of that might have something to do with other things other than the Israeli stuff, might have to do with internal things they don't want her talking about with contracts. Who knows, right? But I get a sense that Ben Shapiro is starting to realize that maybe Daily Wire is not going to be doing as well if he doesn't take a little more balanced position. Just saying. Mike Lawler, of course, is the guy who proposed this. He's one of the most unctuous people down there. And the bill, of course, is in response to ongoing protests, they say. It would amend Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits educational institutions from discriminating on the basis of race or national origin to consider the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism for the enforcement of federal anti-discrimination laws. And so, therefore, it's larger than Title VI. The bill from New York Republican Mike Lawler sat in committee since October, only to be quickly pushed through beginning earlier this week. 21 Republicans opposed the bill, including conservatives such as Byron Donalds of Florida, Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia, Matt Gaetz of Florida, and, of course, we know Thomas Massie of Kentucky, and 70 Democrats also opposed the bill. This is LifeSite News. The bill next needs to pass the Senate, where Republicans Tim Scott of Florida and Tom Cotton of Arkansas and others have a similar piece of legislation. Just disgusting. Josh Hawley, Rick Scott, Tom Cotton, just ridiculous. You should vacate your offices immediately. The bill would codify the IHRA's definition of anti-Semitism into federal law. The group defines anti-Semitism as follows. Anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred toward Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed towards Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and their property toward Jewish community institutions and religious facilities. But of course, the statute says that they can go beyond that. The Department of Education could then use this definition to investigate K through 12 and colleges for harassment of Jewish students. President Trump signed an executive order to this effect in 2019. And of course, seeing that it was an executive order, they couldn't do it. So they've come back with a piece of legislation to try to do it. IHRA examples of manifestations of anti-Semitism, according to their definitions, include saying Jews killed Jesus or making stereotypical allegations about Jews. And again, if you don't think this is going to apply to businesses, it will. He also said, Shapiro, an Orthodox Jew and Harvard University Law School grad, said the bill is obviously unconstitutionally vague. Well, even if it weren't vague, if it were specific, it would still be unconstitutional, Mr. Law School graduate. Duh. He also said the New Testament clearly said the Jews did hand over Jesus to Pontius Pilate to be killed. Christians saying all that stuff about Jewish leaders having Jesus killed doesn't make Christians anti-Semitic, Shapiro said. Thanks, Ben. Great job. Great job defending free speech. Awesome. Very impressive. Unbelievable. All right. Now let's get to Joe Biden's and Anthony Blinken's hollow support of free speech. Just going to give you a preview of this one. This is one of the two pieces that I had published at MRC TV today. So get this. Joe Biden, whose entire career in the White House as both vice president and president, has seen the most sweeping, deep, egregious, and aggressive censorship of Americans in national history, on May 3rd actually displayed the unabashed audacity to issue a statement promoting the occasion of World Press Freedom Day. Seriously, everybody. And as you can see at the top of the page, the Media Research Center stands with Israel. I don't know how you can stand with a nation state if you're a person, but the Media Research Center is a corporation, as Israel is a corporation. I disagree with the MRC's position there, so obviously. So, because I don't stand with any nation state, so it doesn't matter what nation state it is. So I said, this is not a joke from Joe Biden when he wasn't busy pleasantly recalling how the FBI reached out to Twitter to suppress the truth about his son's laptop hard drive when he wasn't enjoying the political advantage he, the Ministry of Truth, and many other government agencies and their collective allies have gained because the U.S. government actively worked to suppress dissent on everything from COVID lockdowns to parental discomfort with woke pedagogy. He opined in part, quote, journalists go to great lengths to expose corruption, document wars, and other urgent world events, bring to light threats of public safety, and bring citizens the information they need to participate fully in their societies. Where's Amtrak? Some journalists have given their lives to this work. Others have suffered grievous injuries or lost their freedom. I said, coming from the man who, as vice president, saw the Espionage Act targeted at more journalists and whistleblowers than all previous administrations combined, going back to the passage of the act during World War I, that is a perverse and infuriating statement. One wonders what Stella Assange and many members of the Australian Parliament thought about Biden's gross grandstanding, since their appeal to have Assange allowed back to Australia has fallen on Biden's deaf ears. I'll give you more of that tomorrow. I shot a video for it. And that will be coming out mañana, I do believe. Yes. And let's take the opportunity now, however, to start talking about some economic news, shall we? Yeah. Let's talk news and hear from our friends, that fake band from the 60s on through to today, Spinal Tap, my friends.
Stop wasting my time. You know what I want. You know what I need. Oh, maybe you don't. Do I have to come right flat out and tell you everything? Give me some money. Give me some money.
Yeah, all right. Drumming. Yeah, with Ed Begley Jr. looking funky with those glasses. Very cool. Like it. All right. So first off, to introduce the topic of the economy, let's turn to those office spaces, which, of course, Gerald Celente has been trying to warn people about those things for a long time. Professor St. Onge has been watching this as well. Pete St. Onge has the news. Let's give it to us.
Another domino is falling for small business, the backbone of America's economy that account for 62 million American jobs, roughly half of the total. A few days ago, Bloomberg reported a new study that finds fully 43% of small businesses were unable to pay their rent on time last month. That's the highest delinquency rate since the darkest days of the COVID lockdowns. Keep in mind, small businesses employ almost half of all Americans, and the 33 million small businesses in America make up almost half of the entire economy. Moreover, the past 25 years, small businesses created 63% of all new jobs, about 2/3. In other words, big companies outsource jobs or replace them with machines. It's small companies that actually employ people. So why are small businesses in trouble? Simple: costs are going up, sales are going down. A few weeks ago, I mentioned data from the National Federation of Independent Businesses. That's the main trade association for small businesses. That data showed that small business optimism is at an 11-year low, as in the lowest since the molasses slow recovery from the 2008 crisis. According to that study, fewer than a third of businesses founded before the pandemic, which is almost all of them, are earning as much as they did before the pandemic. That's interesting considering the economy allegedly grew by nearly a third in nominal terms since the pandemic, but apparently inflation gobbled it all up and then some, and has now left businesses unable to pay the rent. Even among new businesses, those founded since the pandemic, just 40% are doing better than last year, which is also strange considering we just came off a blockbuster year for GDP, allegedly. And yet small businesses are doing worse. In fact, nearly half cannot afford the rent. That's a Krugman-approved miracle economy. You would hate to see a weak one. So what's next? Brought to you by Unchained.com. Keep in mind, all these numbers are before the new stagflationary reality kicks in. At this point, we are getting near daily reports of slowing sales, slowing hiring, and reaccelerating inflation. It has been 50 years since small businesses had to weather a storm like this, since the 70s. And apparently, the small businesses that are the backbone of the economy were already falling down before the storm even hits. As in, the foundations were eroded by Bidenomics, and here comes the ocean. What could stop it? Simple: cut the spending, cut the red tape, cut the small business taxes, and the inflationary Green New Deals and billions for Ukraine. The problem, of course, is the incentives. From Washington's perspective, hundreds of thousands of failed businesses is not a threat. It is an opportunity to shift potentially millions of Americans from the small government entrepreneur class to the big government welfare class. We've seen this play out in cities from Detroit to Baltimore, where strangling small businesses actually worked out for the left that consolidated their power. We may be about to see this on a nationwide scale. A new episode of the Roundup podcast just dropped with all the daily videos. Check it out at petersaintange.com. Okay, we'll be watching. See you next time.
Great job from Pete St. Ange, of course. And to tie a little bow around that, let me offer you this. This is my latest one from MRC TV on, yes, you got it. If you saw it over the weekend, everybody, then you know that a man about whom I have written previously, we talked about this on Friday, Jared Bernstein, is in the news. That's Jared. It could only be Jared. So everybody, yeah, I didn't give it a lot of oomph for, the audience here, the staff and so on. I could really pump out the volume, pump up the jams, but I'll just keep the voice low and stuff. So hitting the note might be a little difficult when you're not going full force. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to crack concrete around here the way Tom Jones can do. So yeah, Jared Bernstein was in the news because, of course, he was featured in a documentary about MMT. That would be the magic money tree, as David Knight describes it. Modern monetary theory. AOC loves MMT, sitting up there in a tree, KASSING. And so he had no clue not only about MMT, but he also didn't have a clue as to how to answer their questions. And so I got to write about this weekend. In fact, Eric Shiner sent me the link to the video after we finished the show around 9:30 or so. I got the text from Eric. He goes, "Did you see this?" Something like that. I was like, "Yeah, dude, I talked about it on the show." So here it is. I put together a little explainer for Jared and the people behind MMT. They don't seem to be able to see eye to eye either, and they're both really having a hard time understanding what economics is about. Jared is even worse off because he just embarrassed himself. So let's check this out, my friends, and let me know what you think. This one just out at MRC TV.
Perhaps a good way to think about Jared Bernstein is to imagine him as the titular character of a bad network sitcom called That's Jared, in which every week the buffoonish chief White House economic advisor stumbles into another embarrassing made-for-TV blunder. The canned laughter will erupt, of course, as credits roll, and we hear the theme close with, "It can only be Jared." Unfortunately, this isn't fiction, and it's not funny. Hi, everyone. I'm Gardner Goldsmith for MRC TV. Boy, what a weekend it has been for those of us who are interested in truth and economics. Gaining web attention Friday, the 3rd of May, and then continuing to spread like a bad joke, the man whom we at MRC TV already have cited for exhibiting utter vacancy when it comes to economics, again has made himself a laughingstock by exhibiting a faux affable, almost clownish inability to explain how the corrupt and inflationary U.S. government's fiat monetary system works. The clip is derived from a film on what many Americans have come to know as modern monetary theory, or MMT, and opens with Bernstein saying,
if you want to feel your energy levels skyrocket, you've got to try out this organ complex by Paleo Valley. It's buy one, get one free.
The U.S. government can't go bankrupt because we can print our own money.
In response, author and Stony Brook University professor Stephanie Kelton, the primary proponent of MMT, details of which we soon will explore in this video. Well,
I will go back for you on that. I'm sorry. I got to get the right ad blocker. So yeah. Oh, it would have been so wonderful too. But I want to make it smooth so you can see the intro going into what Jared, it can only be Jared, said.
And opens with Bernstein saying,
the U.S. government can't go bankrupt because we can print our own money.
In response, author and Stony Brook University professor Stephanie Kelton, the primary proponent of MMT, details of which we soon will explore in this video, well, she asks a simple question.
Why exactly are we borrowing in a currency that we print ourselves? I'm waiting for someone to stand up and say, why do we borrow our own currency in the first place?
Now, before addressing her questions or seeing how Jared couldn't answer them, one can note that she presents us with the false assumption at the heart of every government spending and government mandated currency problem. She assumes the we. She assumes you and I, by definition of the central authority imposing this definition on us, are part of her plans, and that the diktats of the government are something to which we somehow magically consent. Well, Jared fares even worse than she does, responding with what starts a series of malapropisms and mental zigzags that is unbelievable as he tries to figure out how government spending, borrowing, fiat currency, and logic can actually coexist. Hint, Jared, they can't. Thus, he says,
well, again, some of this stuff gets, some of the language some of the language and concepts are just confusing.
Remember that confusing part, because it comes in handy for the end of this wonderful episode of That's Jared.
The government definitely prints money, and it definitely lends that money, which is why...
At this point, he seems to wonder what he's saying and then tries to reassure himself, sort of like a blind man trying to navigate a maze of his own creation.
The government definitely prints money, and then it lends that money by selling bonds. Is that what they do?
Not quite, but Jared retains his smile as he offers this meandering exposition.
They sell bonds. Yeah, they sell bonds, right? Since they sell bonds and people buy the bonds and lend them the money. Yeah.
Jared appears to nod as if reassuring himself that he's hit on the right point. And indeed, he finally got it, or half of it. The U.S. government spends so much money that it can't balance the books solely through taxation. And thus, it floats bonds, which people buy. Remember that, in quotes, people. Of course, this contradicts what he said at the opening about the government lending the money. Sure, the feds hand out plenty of unconstitutional loans to college kids and cozy corporations, to foreign nation states and international organizations. But when looking at how the U.S. government funds itself, Well, Jared ought to know that it's not through lending. It's through taxing floating bonds, i.e. borrowing, Jared, and then taxing and borrowing more to pay off the previous issuance of bonds. And what entity buys those bonds? Well, the majority of the treasuries are bought by the bank consortium to which Congress in 1913 gave a monopoly to print what the government calls legal currency, that being the Federal Reserve. And the Fed doesn't tell us what it holds in any commodity like gold to be actually called reserves for that term, Federal Reserve. Shh, don't tell anybody that they won't tell anybody. And of course, the Federal Reserve just invents its money, more and more of it to, that's right, buy U.S. bonds. And since the CARES Act of 2020, they also buy the bonds of cozy corporations, the names and balance sheets of which the Fed is not required to divulge to us troglodytes out here. Now, part of this whole shell game gets appropriate attention from proponents of MMT. And this is part of Professor Kelton's logic trap for Bernstein. Of course, Bernstein already has trapped himself by believing there is anything morally acceptable or constitutionally proper or even economically laudable about the Federal Reserve cartel. But before Ms. Kelton prods Bernstein some more, he actually continues.
A lot of times, at least to my ear with MMT, the language and the concepts can be kind of unnecessarily confusing, but there is no question that the government prints money and then it uses that money to
That's right. He flips back to his original confusion. It's unbelievable, everybody.
So, I guess I can't really talk. I don't get it. I don't know what they're talking about. Because it's like.
And he pauses, perhaps perplexed by this incredible conundrum. Yeah, folks, this is the Biden administration's head of economic advisors.
The government clearly prints money. It does it all the time, and it clearly borrows. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this debt and deficit conversation. So I don't think there's anything confusing there.
And that's it. Biden's great instructor in economics, well, he's all set. And remember, even though he admitted it's confusing, it's not confusing. Well, to supply some clarity, let's bring him and Ms. Kelton into economics class. First, we'll address the error in Kelton's premise, offered in her trapping question, which is the idea that we are borrowing in a currency we print ourselves. One can remind Ms. Kelton and Mr. Bernstein that the U.S. government does not print its own money. The Fed does that and then buys the government debt that Congress keeps issuing. This, by definition, is an inflation of the money supply, which bids up prices for goods and services, bids down the buying power of the Federal Reserve notes we already have, inspires malinvestment into projects, hirings, and the use of resources that normally would not see such investment, and leads to an eventual bust. As people pull back their spending, the investments are revealed to have been made on false economic assumptions, and prices have to drop to liquidation levels. The Constitution does allow the U.S. Treasury to coin money rather than print it, but the Constitution does not say the government money shall be the sole mandated currency. MMTers pose such questions because essentially they carry the inflationary baton handed down by John Maynard Keynes. The entire paradigm of Keynesian economics is arrogant. It assumes for earners how to invest, when to invest, and why, and it results in massive inflationary price increases. And the new crop of central planners pushing MMT embrace Keynesianism, but they add two caveats. As Joseph Solons Mullen has written for the Mises Institute, they think there's no need for a central bank to engage in the money printing because the U.S. Treasury can do it. And they think that the way to control the inflation caused by government-created money is to tax the real money away from us. It's a cozy way to throw the albatross of inflation around everybody's necks. And it not only inflates the money supply and causes all the boom bust problems I noted, it takes real money from real people's pockets, just like today, and replaces it with fake fiat government mandated cash. How about this instead? How about Bernstein and Kelton leave us out of their mandates and taxes and fake money plans? That would be a lot more enjoyable than more reruns of this tragic comedy headed by Jared and supported by a cast of MMT pretenders who want to take the stage. That royal we they keep employing, I don't see that as appropriate. Please stop embracing me with your arms and leave me alone. Hey, thanks for watching, everybody. Please.
All right, so I think that covers it. Obviously, you could see there were some edits there. Some of those, I think it was mostly for time because it would have been about a 15-minute video. It was a very long piece. It was about 1,700 words, and that's, typically they go for a 800-word or 750-word piece. That man, Joseph Solis Mullen, is the man that I mentioned a few times here and read some segments from the fake China threat published by the Libertarian Institute. If you want to check out Joseph Solis Mullen's work, his last name is spelled SOLIS-MULLEN. One of the things that I sort of wish had remained in the video and is in the text piece for this is that I offered some of the history of the Roman inflation, and that's towards the last eighth of the video. But I think it's valuable to mention here that you'll see here that I wrote. Let's see. Yeah, it wasn't that much that I put in. It wouldn't have taken that much time. I said Joseph Solis Mullins notes that MMT theory has no use for the Fed since the Treasury can do all the magic. And that's the big crux of the argument there, is they think that because the U.S. government is borrowing in dollars that the Treasury could just print up itself. It doesn't need to borrow it from the Federal Reserve at interest. It could just print up the stuff, right? Okay. But that, of course, would take away the power of the central bank to hide the fact that they don't have any reserves. It would also take the power of the central bank away from handing the money out to the various banks to balance their books. They used to do it every week. Now they do it every day. And so that would be tremendously big. And of course, the international banking cartel wouldn't like it all that much either. But it would still be inflationary either way. And as I mentioned, I said they've already tried it using just the treasury of a nation state in the Roman Empire, which called back government-created coins and also got them from taxation. The government then shaved off small amounts of the silver, made extra coins, and reissued the old coins, claiming they were worth just as much as before. It's a cozy way to throw the albatross of inflation around everyone's necks. And it not only inflates the money supply and causes all the boom-bust problems we noted, it takes real money from our pockets and replaces it with fake fiat cash. And I also went into the boom-bust cycle, how things get bid up and they need to be brought down at liquidation prices and so on. And so I thought it was pretty good. Obviously, you can't have it exactly the way you want it sometimes just because of time constraints. But I think it does get, I don't want to leave myself open to vulnerabilities in the argument, so sometimes there will be something pulled out where it kind of leaves it a little bit vulnerable. They're usually pretty good if they notice that I've sort of stated something like that earlier in the video and they need to pull something out to be like, he kind of said it here, so he'll pull that out. The editors are there. But anyway, thanks to the guys at MRC TV for getting that out there. And thanks to all of you for watching. I really had a great time tonight. And I want to give you one more thing here that I hope to share with you, as far as the people in the conspiracy I consider with such great empathy. I think they're so many of us are working towards the same thing, and I sympathize with many people who feel the frustrations that we do. And tomorrow I'm hoping I might have to do it on Wednesday to go into more of this WHO stuff. If you go to my Sunday News Assembly, you'll see I have a big section on the WHO World Pandemic Treaty and the revisions to the WHO so-called rules. That is a real big deal. However, I want to mention that the Knights of the Storm have been doing some great stuff. So let me find this post from Jason Barker about the Knights of the Storm and get it out there for you. Here it is. All right. So this is some good stuff, and it's such a great website, and I'm really glad. I thought, I'm like, man, the way they set this, when they first started, I was like, the way they set this site up, it's pretty cool. And they've got so many links to good people putting out their items, and they've got the schedule. So here's Jason with the new developments at the Knights of the Storm website. Check it out. Here we go.
Analytics. There's a few pages that people really use.
There we go.
Knights of the Storm and the Foxhole podcast. And I just had a quick announcement to make. It's nothing really huge. It's actually kind of huge to me because it's something I've worked on for several weeks, if not months. But anyway, as y'all know, I got the Knights of the Storm website, which a lot of people use. And by looking at analytics, there's a few pages that people really use, which is it's really great that we've been able to provide that for people. But I wanted to show what we got going on this new now. Let me go ahead and full screen this real quick. So the Friends tab is one of the most popular ones, and that hosts all the people that we've interviewed, people we watch, people we like, like really good people. They have good content, and we're always adding to that. The schedule tab is probably the most popular, and it has a Monday through Sunday schedule. And there's links to where the live chat is, because that's kind of, we were born out of live chat. So we kind of really like the live chat, and we feed off that when we do our shows. We like to interact with the people who watch. But what's really cool, and I've worked very hard on making this work. Let me go ahead and get this out of the full screen mode so you can see my ugly mug. But what we've done is this podcast tab. And this used to be the listen tab, and it was just linked to where you can see us, just the Knights of the Storm, which you can see that at the bottom of the screen anyway. So it was kind of redundant to have it. But what we have done now is we've taken the folks that actually upload their stuff to like Spotify or Spreaker or something like that, and we've incorporated the RSS feed into here. So let's take a look. Let's just take the Foxhole, for example. That's one of my shows I do. If I click on that, I can actually get access to every single episode. Yeah, it only shows a few, but you can load the previous ones if you want. And yeah, it plays real time. And this is really handy. You can hear, yeah, see, it works. It's really handy for mobile. And the really cool thing about this, which I didn't expect to happen, was if you look down here, this little arrow thing here, you can actually download this episode and save it on your mobile device. So if you had to go on like a long trip and you didn't know if you had connectivity and you wanted something to listen to, you could actually download. I'm not saying my show is the best show in the world, but we're going to add some more people to this, and you could download their episodes and save them on your phone, your tablet, whatever. And then when you're offline, you can listen to them. So that's pretty cool. And the great thing about it is that when you minimize the screen or, shut it off or it locks out or whatever, it'll continue to play, which that doesn't always happen on every platform. That's one thing I like about freeworld.fm is that you can do that. If you're listening to Free World, you can lock your screen, and it saves a ton of battery because it's not got the screen lit up the whole time. Some places don't do that. Well, ours apparently does do that, so that's kind of cool. And I guess the last thing I'll say is what we're working on for the future is this watch tab right here. I used to have links to where you can see us, but I'm trying to incorporate a similar type of feed where you can see the latest episodes. So right now, all I can do is manually update it every week to show you the latest episode, but I do have a way. It's a little bit of an extra something I have to pay for every month. It's not a lot. I might go ahead and do it, but it will give a feed of the Rumble or whatever. So you can come here. Basically, what we're trying to do is a one-stop shop. That's what we're trying to do. Let me go ahead and remove this out of here. There we go. A one-stop shop is what we're trying to do with theknightsofthestorm.com for, people in our group, in our circle, our like-minded individuals, to have a place to go where it's not nonsense. And you got a few options of people to listen to and to watch. And I'm trying to make it as easy as possible. And that's it. I'm pretty excited. Let me know in the comments what you think about it. Will you use this service, the podcast thing? Will you use the watch thing? Is it worth it for me to look into that, to make a feed of different podcasters, video stuff that you can watch it kind of like on demand and not have to go search? Because I could really pool it all together. If they're on YouTube or Rumble or whatever, I can really pool it all together and put it in one spot to where you don't have to like jump over different platforms. So I don't know. Let me know in the comments what you think. Let me know how I can improve it. If you've been in here and you've looked at the website and you have critiques for me, I'm always trying to make it. It's not for me. This is for you guys. I enjoy doing it. Don't get me wrong, but I don't want to do the work if it's not going to bear any fruit. So let me know what you think. And I guess on that note, I will be out of here.
All right. And Jason, I know Jason's over in the chat. And Jason, thank you. Thank you so much. Anarchy Andrew says, I love podcasts so I can multitask, cooking, gardening, driving, etc. It would be great if Liberty Conspiracy could be converted into a podcast. Well, right now, Andrew, I got to tell you, every night I'm turning it into an audio podcast, and you can get it via my Substack. I've got to get it transferred over to Podbean, and then that will start getting it spread out. I used to go through Podomatic. Haven't been over there for a while. There's still some Liberty Conspiracy things being hosted by Podomatic, like the Sam Blumenfeld. The last interview with Sam Blumenfeld is over there as well. And JB, thanks for being there, JB Morrison. And I know you had to go. Good night, Garden, everyone. Take care. Enjoyed it. Thank you very much. And Jason says, inside Rokfin, Jason says, thanks, Guard. I'm excited that I got this working. Well, you got the skills, man. You are great at that. He says, I had to call the web host people to get the bugs worked out. Great stuff, man. Great stuff. And Karen Carpenter, thanks for being there. Harry Hart, thank you also. And, it's interesting when I get to read your names. I wish I was able to get together with some friends. There was a fundraiser thing going on for one of the guys in high school the year behind me had passed away. And so a lot of the folks from my old high school were getting together downtown Milford, New Hampshire. And so I thought, boy, I hope I can make it over. My friend Mike Fox invited me over, and I saw a bunch of people that I hadn't seen for the longest time. Great people. It was a nice afternoon. And it was sort of an open air thing that used to be a gas station with a fix-it garage. And they turned the fix-it garage into like a bar, and they have all sorts of cool stuff. And they had things, I don't drink or anything, but it's right next to part of the Sauhegan River in Milford, New Hampshire, which is an old mill town and stuff, obviously. And very, very cool for a lot of granite. They had a lot of granite quarries and everything. So it was great to see everybody. And we were talking about, old times and family and stuff like that. And it was just so good. And I wish I could do the same thing with all you, hang out at that place, or, throwing rocks into a river or something like that, and just hanging out and chatting. And you get that sense when you see a good guy like Jason right there, you just get that sense like, yeah, he's one of the good guys. So thanks, Jason. And thanks, Brandon Bennett, for also being over in X. Really appreciate everybody who's watching over in X. If I haven't been able to call you out by name or anything like that so far. Birdhouse Blues says, I don't care what they say about you, Goldsmith. You're okay in my book. Thank you, Birdhouse. And someday we'll have the Birdhouse Blues Birdhouse. Yeah, that'll be cool. Maybe what it could do is it could record the sounds of the birds when they're there. Yeah. Maybe it could be when the birds land on the feeder, it starts the camera and you get to see them, something like that. That'd be kind of cool. Eavesdropping on the birds. We could be like the NSA, bird watching. And also in Rumble, I want to thank Freegan for being there. Really appreciate that. And also everybody who has been watching over on YouTube. I know I didn't get to, I see over here. Seven Hemley. Hey, thank you. Seven Hemley says, abortion methods are not used in emergency situations, which is usually the case when a mother's life is in jeopardy and the viability of the child is factored in. Don't know what's going on, but my last comment is not showing up. Oh, geez. Well, I'm sorry about that. Let me see what else I might be able to see here with the comments. I'm going to scroll down a little bit and thank everybody for watching over at the YouTube. And yeah, and definitely spread the word if you get the opportunity. Yeah, it looks like I can't scroll down any further. So, but it is good to know that we've been on there and we've grown by a number of subscribers. So spread the word at YouTube. We'll keep going as long as we can. I appreciate it. And of course, Rumble is, I think, going to be the long-term home for people who aren't subscribers at Rokfin or not part of the original group at Rokfin. But I'd like for both, to grow, which would be fantastic. So thank you, everybody. I'm going to go take care of the kitty. She's under my tutelage tonight. So I'll leave you with a little something cool. Sometime what I ought to do is like a goodbye video, like an end of the night video with just the cat, like this cat here or the other cats, like put together some footage of those guys. That would be cool. That'd be really cool. Now, tomorrow night, I'm not quite sure, but we might get a visit from Benjamin Netanyahu. I'm working on it right now. I got the team, they're hardworking guys. Got to get on top of things, and they're doing all their contacts and everything like that. So we'll see how it goes. I don't know. If he has a visit, then obviously we'll get a bunch of government money and everything will be great. So rock on. Have a great night, everybody. Peace, love. God bless you all. Thank you. Happy springtime or fall if you're in the South.